Looking to sound like you know what's going on in the world? Pop culture, social strategy, comedy, and other funny stuff? Well, join the club and settle in for the Jeff Dwoskin Show. It's not the podcast we deserve, but the podcast we all need, with your host, Jeff Dwoskin.
All right, Roger. Thank you so much for that amazing introduction. You get the show going each and every week, and this week was no exception. Welcome, everybody, to episode 77 of Live from Detroit, the Jeff Dwoskin Show. As always, I am your host, Jeff Dwoskin. Great to have you back for another spectacular week of podcast goodness. This week, I am so excited. My guest is Jon Heffron. That's right, Jon Heffron, winner of Last Comic Standing Season 2. One of the most hilarious comedians ever. We both went to Eastern Michigan University. I didn't know him, but that is where I saw him for the first time while in college. We talk a lot about that. So I'm so excited to have gotten the chance to finally meet and talk with Jon about his career and all that good stuff. And I'm so excited to share that conversation with you. And that's coming up in just a few minutes. I don't usually dedicate an episode to anyone specifically, but this week, with all the talk of Eastern Michigan University with Jon Heffron, I do want to dedicate this episode to my dear friend Aaron Rubin, who recently lost his battle with cancer, who I met at Eastern Michigan University. We were friends for decades. I know he would have loved this conversation, as it also includes our good friend Jeff Katz. Life is short, everybody, so definitely hug and kiss the ones you love. Tomorrow is never guaranteed. Enjoy today. I miss you, Aaron, and this one is for you. Whew, all right. Did not know if I'd be able to get through that, but here we are. I do want to thank all of you for coming back week after week. It means the world to me. It really does. I appreciate all your subscriptions and likes and follows and all the podcast apps. Which podcast app, Jeff? Whichever one you love the most. Good Pods, Podchaser, Apple, Google, Podcast Republic, whatever it might be. Thank you very much. Tell all your friends about the podcast. That's how we grow. You can also head over to jeffisfunny.com, home of Live from Detroit, the Jeff Dwoskin Show on the World Wide Web. There you can buy me a coffee. You can sign up for my mailing list. You can listen to every episode of the podcast. So much you can do. Also, this is exciting. So our live show that we do every Wednesday, 9:30 p.m. Eastern time, called Crossing the Streams. You can watch us live on YouTube or Twitter at Bigmacher, Bigmacher, or on Facebook, facebook.com/JeffIsFunny. We go live every Wednesday, 9:30 p.m. Eastern time. There's 45 episodes on YouTube you can check out right now. Amazing TV watching suggestions. But here's the cool thing. We're now live on Fireside simultaneously. So if you have the Fireside app, go to firesidechat.com/Jeff Dwoskin. There you can catch the last couple episodes we streamed via Fireside. Download the Fireside app. Well, Jeff, why should we listen via Fireside? Well, here's the exciting thing. On Fireside, I can bring you up from the audience and we can actually talk during the show. On YouTube, you can comment and we can put the comment on screen, which is super fun. Don't get me wrong. But on Fireside, you can actually join the conversation. So check that out. Firesidechat.com/Jeff Dwoskin, jeffisfunny.com. You got a lot to do this week. So I'm gonna get on with the show. And now it's time for the social media tip. All right, this is the part of the show where I share a little bit of my social media knowledge with you. A little 411 I picked up on the street so we can all elevate our social game together. Who are you, Jeff? Oh, I don't know. I used to run social for $1 billion company. I've had my own social company for many, many, many years, and I love giving back. One way we give back is through hashtag Roundup. You know hashtag Roundup. We're going to read tweets from one of the hashtag games we do every day at the end of the show. So hang on for that. The social media tip this week. Hey, Jeff, wasn't firesidechat.com kind of a social media tip? Yes, it was. I guess you get a twofer. And this is a twofer for me because this allows me to give you a little bit of a social media tip if you're an event, but also talk about an event I was just at. I mentioned in the previous episodes, I was at the Motor City Comic-Con. That was so cool. I got to run 2 panels and judge the cosplay contest. That was super fun. I ran a panel with Patrick Renna, Ham from The Sandlot, and David Yost. the original True Blue Power Ranger. So that was super fun. Love doing that, and I'm sure I'll be back at the next one. But here's a social media tip for you, something the Motor City Comic Con did extremely well. They had a hashtag called hashtag MC and then the number 3, MC3. And what they did is they asked everyone who was there taking pictures to use that hashtag across the different platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. So in essence, they were able, using this hashtag for their event, to collect massive amounts of photos that people took at their event. That's an excellent use of a hashtag for any kind of event, Comic-Con, bar mitzvah, wedding, whatever it might be. I got to work in my time at the Motor City Comic-Con, got to give you a cool social media tip. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed sharing it. And that's the social media tip. I do want to thank all of you for supporting the sponsors week after week. It means the world to me. When you support the sponsors, you're supporting us here at Live from Detroit, the Jeff Dwoskin Show. And that's how we keep the lights on. This week's sponsor, Ypsilanti, Michigan's own Spaghetti Bender. That's right. No better place to gather with good friends for some good times. If you're looking for spaghetti, then you need to head over today. Yeah, we got pasta. We got pizza. The best Italian food you're going to find in Ypsilanti, Michigan. Friendly people, crazy atmosphere, and cheap prices. Prices so cheap, you won't even believe it's spaghetti. But according to our lawyers, it's still legally spaghetti. People come from all over the world for spaghetti at the Spaghetti Bender. We got spaghetti with meat sauce, spaghetti with meatballs, spaghetti with Italian sausage, spaghetti with marinara, and spaghetti with garlic butter. If you want spaghetti, we got spaghetti. And we're going to throw in some homemade minestrone soup and our very own legendary house salad. So if you're hungry for spaghetti, head over to the Spaghetti Bender today in Ypsilanti, Michigan. Use code JeffIsFunny for 44% off their already ridiculously low prices. All right. I highly recommend spaghetti from the Spaghetti Bender. Quite delish. I'm kind of hungry now. I think I'm going to go grab something to eat. So I think that's the perfect time for me to share my conversation I had with comedian and Detroit legend Jon Heffron with you. Enjoy. All right, everyone. I'm excited to introduce you to my next guest, comedian, author, Detroit legend, Jon Heffron. Jon, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I don't know what the protocol is. If you're allowed to, when you're doing somebody else's podcast, are you allowed to bring in your own music? Like, I was thinking about that. Like, I'm a guest on your podcast, but if you were to say to me, comedian Jon Heffron, and then I just kind of piped in with my own background music and also my own cheering, I think that's a little bit egotistical. It's almost like, you know, I walk into somebody's house and I set the, I don't know how to turn these off now, and I set, you know, the temperature. So I don't know what podcasting etiquette is.
I think if you bring your own intro music, there could be a moment of awkwardness with that.
I was doing that when COVID first happened, the first round, COVID 0.1. We're in COVID, you know, upgrade 0.2 right now. And I was doing a bunch of Zoom stuff, new to it, you know, still don't love it. But I found a way. I found all these like one person giggling or kind of laughing a little. And I found some male voices, some female voices, not big crowds laughing, like one or two person. And on my little thing that I play sound bites and music for my podcast, I would, as I was talking, I would just hit a little bit of laughter. Like somebody was just like giggling. And the whole time I was just doing these dumb Zooms. I was sweetening the audience.
I think if you're doing a Zoom and you want to sweeten to keep yourself going, I think that's fair.
Yeah, that should have been, and I don't even know if it was, that should have been a bit, like if I could have hired somebody that had all those laughter in those soundtracks and then logged them on into one of the Zooms and they just listened and they were just kind of firing off the random noises, that would have been a thing. I would have had that person be on every Zoom with me that they could, you know, because a lot of times I would do those Zooms and I would just stare at 20 red microphones with slashes through them. There was literally no response. And you would tell people, hey, can you open your mics or have some type of, and maybe two people would, and then you'd hear their kids whipping by them or screaming or something. So I'm like, seems like this could be all faked just to make it enjoyable as the performer.
I think it's a good idea, though, for a good side hustle. I don't want to wish the pandemic to kick up so I could start that side hustle with you.
One of the Zoom for some company I did, that they actually had a row. So every time you do, there's a billion different services you use to do live stuff. And this one had a row of 20 people, and there were little squares below you. Those people had their video on so everybody could see those 20. And it was a lot of people disinterested, like just staring. You can tell they're reading stuff online. You can tell they were eating. So then I thought, with all the out of work actors in the world, that seems like that would have been a thing where you could have filled it with 10 people that smile and kind of laugh just the whole show. You pay them $15 for that half hour that they had to sit there. That seems like that could be a thing.
That is a great idea. I was talking to Craig Shoemaker, and he had like a little studio in his house or wherever he was filming, and he'd bring in 10 people during the COVID stuff. So they'd have actual people reacting in the room with him while he was doing the Zoom calls.
Would that be, as in this had nothing to do with Craig? I'm just saying, you know how you get invited to like a kid's graduation or a 5-year-old's birthday party or a wedding? How just what an inconvenience and how much you don't want to do whatever it is. Can you imagine if you were friends with a comedian and they said, can you come to my house and sit in my little office while I do material on a Zoom call? There's no way. There's no way I'd make that. I would definitely be texting halfway there going, there's a big boulder fell in front of the car and a couple people are dead. So I don't think I can make it.
I hadn't thought of it from that point of view. I was thinking of it as from the point of view that it was helping him. But you're right. I didn't think of it from the people he was inviting. Absolutely.
Yeah. And then you'd have to, after the show, tell because we're all the same, you'd have to tell comedian, hey, that was really good. Because then they're going to want feedback. So then you got to do, hey, that was good. Yeah, that one joke. I've never heard it before. I couldn't think of a worse scenario. Although I did one. I had a video. And now I'm trying to think of where it was, where Cisco had this video wall and you would stand in front of it. It was Zoom. It's everything we're doing now, but this was like 15 years ago or maybe even 10. So you went to a conference room and the whole wall was a video and I had to perform the people who were in with like DC, New York, and Los Angeles. So I was in a room with 20 people. And each of those cities I just said had 20 people in that room. And they were trying to show this video conferencing that was so crazy. And you could be just like you were in the meeting with them. So I was doing Zoom calls actually 10, 15 years ago. I was doing comedy.
So you're way ahead of the curve. This pandemic then should have been cakewalk for you.
Yeah, I should have dusted, It was kind of a cool setup. Now that I think about it, like, I don't know if anyone used that system, but you had that in your house. So it'd be we're close to it. I mean, we're actually doing it now. You're just not as big as, my wall.
I'm much smaller than you.
Right.
So, Jon, I have been a big fan of yours for a long time. You're probably one of the very first comedians I ever saw. I saw you at, if you're ready for this, we both went to Eastern Michigan.
Nice.
I saw you at the Spaghetti Bender.
Oh, man. Holy mackerel. That had to have been 25 years ago at the minimum when I was in college.
What year did you graduate college?
92-ish, I believe. 92.
Okay. So
93.
Yeah. So me too. So, so probably 89, 90, somewhere.
Yeah. Yes. That's hilarious. I did that. Oh, I did it. Show at the Spaghetti Bender. Ooh. I wonder how that went. Probably horrible. I couldn't even imagine getting up. Well, maybe I did because at the time I was probably 20 myself. Just doing comedy. It was a full bar full of people my own age. I was probably excited about it.
You were, and here's a funny story.
Okay.
Right? So flash forward to the year. What year was the first Last Comic Standing? 2004. I get a call from my friend Jeff Katz, and he says, "Jeff, are you watching Last Comic Standing? It's Jon Heffron. He was a huge fan of yours in college.
Oh, wow.
At that Spaghetti Bender show, he heckled you." And he's like, "Do you remember I heckled Jon Heffron?" And I'm like, I mean, I remembered, but you know what I mean? And he was like, it's funny because I didn't start doing stand-up comedy till many, many years later. But like for some reason, certain things imprint in your head. And the moment of watching you and him kind of calling you out for, why aren't you doing new material? This is what he said.
Oh, okay. New material.
So at the time.
Okay, go ahead. I'll have opinions.
Well, at the time, I was like, yeah, that's weird. But from his point of view, now that the kind of looking back, he was like a huge fan. He just wanted to hear new material. He didn't understand. Later, when I did comedy, and that moment always stuck with me. I always remembered that interaction.
Right.
But later I remembered, well, of course, you do the same thing over and over again. I didn't recognize that till I started doing it.
Right.
So it was some joke. He remembered even the joke that he cut you off on. It was something like, excuse me for damaging.
Yeah.
It was something to his recollection, because I asked him if I could talk about it. It was something like, I cut myself shaving. I didn't nick it. It's a cut. Nick is the guy that lives down the street.
That was Nick. Oh, that's an old school. Something about getting a haircut.
Yeah.
And I haven't thought about this, which means I'm going to start doing this on stage again. It means it's a new bit, and then your buddy's going to be mad that I'm still doing the Nick bit. But it was something about like a barber nicking you and said, I cut you or I nicked you. I'm like, that's a cut. Yeah, or something like that. Here's why that story's funny. So if the math works out, he saw me do that at the spaghetti. It wasn't like I was on TV. It wasn't like he watched it on a special. There wasn't even like if you go that far back, there wasn't even comedy anything. It was such a weird, like, that's why me performing at this spaghetti bender, that almost makes me so nervous now, because it wasn't like, you were watching Netflix and you were familiar with how comedy works. It wasn't like Comedy Central was even a thing. Maybe during our era, there was like MTV half-hour comedy hour, maybe, but it wasn't popular. Like nobody like watched it. So that dude must have saw me MC at the time would have been the Main Street Comedy Showcase, is now the Ann Arbor Comedy Showcase. So he must have saw me MC there. And then 3 weeks later, I probably only had 11 minutes of material anyway. He saw me do the same bit that I did in Ann Arbor. He was like, come on, man, there's 6 of us that have seen that bit. It's time to start writing. Yeah, that's funny. I wonder even then how I would even handle a heckler. I couldn't even imagine. I probably peed a little, Probably at the spaghetti bender, though, people were walking around. It was you, him, and me were probably the only people that knew that there was a comedy show going on there. Right? Like I just don't see like people sitting paying attention and just watching a show.
At the moment I was watching it, I enjoyed it. I had a different perspective at years later after doing comedy and having been to places like Club Bards or, just the one-nighter type places. Yeah. Anyway, so do you want to say anything to him now? This Tosh.0 moment.
What do you say? Yeah. So I'm assuming, he was, so hungry for new material. I'm assuming he's purchased all my albums and anything I've ever done. Profila. But I am excited that he remembered that, because I do not remember that bit. I found an old tape of me, probably in 92. Somebody brought their huge VHS tape recorder, and I taped a whole, maybe an hour show. Maybe I was headlining in Ann Arbor, and I got so excited to watch it, because in my brain, I'm like, this material is so old that it's going to be new. I just found a new hour of material. Nobody's seen it, and it was just all. So my roommates, I'm 22. Boy, I'm getting older. I'm almost 25, like talking like that. You know what I mean?
That's so funny.
Apologize that he went there to spaghetti bender, risk getting his car or his life jacked in that area. And then I apologize that he probably went to Deja Vu just down the street afterwards. And I apologize for whatever horrible stripper gave him a lap dance. So I apologize for whatever that night, he probably went to the Wooden Nickel after, probably did Jaeger shots. So I apologize for how that night ended for him.
Oh my God, I totally forgot Deja Vu was there.
Right? Like it was, I don't even,
I remember that their tagline was something like 30 beautiful women and one ugly one or something.
Yeah.
Horrible.
Yeah, I'm sure like strip clubs, I'm sure they exist now. It's so out of my realm. But the ugly one, I see somebody trying to cancel that phrase at a strip club. Like that's the thing, that somebody probably complained about. Like you're making fun of the one ugly stripper.
Right.
Is probably the problem. Not the human trafficking part of the whole strip club industry. But that was probably somebody was mad that they were making fun of an ugly stripper, which is all proportional or objective.
It's all the eye of the beholder.
Yeah.
So how did you get into stand-up comedy? What drove you to kind of get on stage?
I was just a fan first in, who knows, when I was a young teen, I would watch it on the Tonight Show. And I was always excited when there was a stand up on. And then that was kind of that era where I don't know the math correctly, but maybe Eddie Murphy's album came out somewhere around there. And then everybody knew it or memorized it. And then I had old Carlin stuff. I was just a fan of stand up. And then when I turned 18, the club would keep talking about in Ann Arbor, you could be 18 to get in. And I just kind of kept waiting and to get excited that I can actually go into this bar or this entertainment thing. So I would go whatever night was 18 and over, maybe a Tuesday night or something. And that was open mic night. And at the time, I had a speech class. Well, I signed up for what it said forensics. And I legit, I've never even done a joke about this. I thought it was blood splatter, bullet wounds. I thought it was police forensics, like forensic science. Competitive speech is the same exact name. I don't understand why there couldn't have been two. I don't understand why they have to share it. One's public speaking, one's blood. It doesn't even make sense. And I didn't read. This was back when you couldn't. I'm going to age myself, but right, you couldn't. We went to school at the same time. I don't think you even signed up online. I think you had to go and physically stand in line for the class you wanted.
And you got cards.
Yeah, like some type of pun. It was, I know we just aged ourselves and we sound like we're 100 years old, but there wasn't, or maybe a phone number. Like I remember at Eastern, you could call. It was like some phone line because I had a roommate whose girlfriend broke up with him and then called that phone number and dropped him from all of his classes.
Each class probably had like a number.
Yeah,
right?
and it wasn't like there were passcodes or there was some super system where you had to prove it was you. So she dropped him. So I remember it was some type of thing like that. And maybe I just didn't read the. So anyway, and Eastern had a really cool speech program in communications department. And I remember failing a class, and they said, "Well, I'm sorry, you know what? This story actually it goes back. The origins is right before Eastern." At OCC, so completely different, but same story. And I never showed up. And he said, well, if you go to the competition on Saturday, we won't fail you because it was like pass-fail class. And Lay said, if you do one speech at this thing, somebody dropped out or they didn't have enough people, you'll pass. And it was a humorous speech, and I did it. And then they said it was really funny, but there was no structure in the speech. So then I started going to Ann Arbor and started seeing open mic there. And just like everyone else, I just saw some horrible acts. And I was like, man, I think I can, I think I can do this. And then we would sit, and I've told this story a million times, but we'd sit in this one girl section just so we could stare at her. She was a waitress at the club. And then she came to us and said, hey, do you want to sign up for open mics? And I said, yeah, just because that, me saying yeah to her meant I was talking to her for 2 seconds. And that waitress was Lucy Liu, the actress. That was her. So she signed me up for open mic. And then the next Tuesday, I started going every Tuesday after that at 18, 19. And then I was hooked. Then that became even at Eastern, kind of like I had friends at Eastern, but I didn't really go out. I was always performing. Like, so my weekends were going to Ann Arbor. There are a couple other clubs that no longer exist that were all within 2-hour driving. So every Thursday through Saturday, I was just emceeing, and did that all through college.
I had heard Lucy Liu was a ticket person at Ann Arbor.
Yeah, she was a waitress. Yeah. Yep.
That's so cool. So Lucy Liu asks you to do open mic. You do open mic. And then that changes the trajectory of your life. Yeah,
because the first one, I get on stage and I just did my speech. And it was it was funny. Like, it was all mom stuff, mom material. Because I was 18. I didn't have a big perspective. And then I remember the manager of the club at the time said, hey, you're really funny, but you shouldn't talk about the same subject your whole time up there, which is horrible advice. And I was on stage for, looking back, probably 3 minutes. So really, I need to throw in 5 topics in 3 minutes, right? So the next week I came back with all dad material. And then I started building the set, then it was like all little brother and sister material. Then bam, I have this 10-minute family set. And then it just I started stacking it on from there.
How long was it before you started either featuring or then kind of where you could do 45 minutes as a headliner?
I don't remember, but it felt like it happened pretty quick because I was working so much as an MC. I was also 20, so I was pretty, not even obsessed. I just really saw, because keep in mind now the level of comics that are out there are just, there's a lot of really good ones. People have some kind of perspective. But when I was starting, it was all these 80s kind of road comics. Like there was good ones in there, went on to be super famous, but there were a lot of these like road hacky type guys. A lot of, boy, I dropped my soap in the shower, and I remember some of their bits, like, and I had to keep kicking it. It was just really like just it was just bad. I remember just being 20 something going, this sucks. Like they're not even like, so my stuff got pretty tight pretty fast, where even as an MC, if you were featuring, I would make it my goal to make it really hard for you to follow me.
That's awesome.
But not egotistical, but just going, nobody's doing their job. Like even now after 30 years of doing stand up, now I'm a little crotchety old guy, but I look at a lot of hosts I work with, in every city. I'm going, God, you host bad. You're like, nobody taught you how to host. It's a thing. Not just, there's bad hosts that do really bad things. And then, they have their one masturbation or pot should be legal joke, and then they get to it. But the rest of the show is kind of sucks. But so I was a really good host. Like I would make that. I knew how to separate. My job's there to welcome people, do announcements, and then scatter in one or two bits and make sure I get the intros right. Like that, I knew. So that happened quick. And because I was clean, now knowing this at, after, again, 30 years, headliners would say, hey, can we have that guy? Is that kid still around? Because I didn't step on anyone's toes. I wasn't doing material that anyone else was doing, and I was clean. So I think I worked more than, most.
A lot of people try so hard to move past the MC spot. At Mark Ridley's Comedy Castle, which I know you're.
Yeah.
Mark was always very kind to me when I started out. He gave me tons and tons of opportunity. It's hard because you're walking out into that cold audience, and it's really toughens you up, so that when it does get easier, meaning like, you're featuring, which is kind of like considered like the easier spot, not easier, but you know what I mean? Like the it's been warmed up, you walk out, you do your thing. And then I had a friend who moved through, who kind of almost jumped to featuring. And so when it got tough, he always found it difficult. That's really, I think, what emceeing is about, is handling the harder situations, so that when you have to handle them later, you can handle them more with finesse, because you kind of took all the hits when you're just an MC.
Plus, I mean, it never, if we're talking, how the sausage is made in comedy, it never goes away. So people who don't know how to host or walk up cold to an audience, that ends up, I do so many corporate events where you're walking up as cold as possible. Listen, the zeros I'm getting paid have changed, but it's the same exact thing. I've been in front of 3,000 people at a convention center where they paid me a lot of money, and the sound guy in the back of the room does the quote unquote voice of God, where they go, ladies and gentlemen, but all they hear is, and then nobody's even clapping, or one or two people start clap, and then you walk up to a completely dead crowd that are still, they're all standing, sitting around at dinner. Nobody's even looking up at you. It never goes away. You never reach a level where you're like, well, luckily I won't ever have to deal with that again. It happens all the time.
Do you know Mike Green?
Mm-hmm.
He'd have like these corporate gigs.
Yeah.
He made some good money. He says, just come do 10 minutes, Jeff. Yeah, but the only thing I care about, get my name right. Yeah. Make it a good introduction when I get up there. Yeah, it's important, because if people don't know what they're about to see, especially with comedy, it's like one of those things. Yeah.
So now in 2021 with comedy, it's a little different. Like people aren't starting through that club system anymore. Now it's a kind of archaic that there's, if you have a good podcast, or man, I know people selling out shows, or, bouncing around a lot of clubs that had 3 TikTok videos. That was it. And they're filling rooms, and suddenly they're headliners. They have zero skill. There's not even, right? They're only performing in front of their psycho fans that happen to, what? You have a 3-minute TikTok? So there's a lot of people that just skip that and won't know. But, this is where I sound like the old guy, where I go back in my day. But, walking up in front of, I had this debate, and I'll leave people's names out of it, but somebody was like, oh, that person. I'm like, they're like an okay comic, but they only perform in front of their bubble of people that are fans of theirs. If I was to take that person and put them in front of 100 random people, would they do as well? There's a whole different skill set to walk in front of 100 strangers than it is the people who are listening to you every week and really kind of know you. You could get away. You're skipping all the get to know me part, because they already know you. So they'll laugh and whatever. So it's a weird skill that in back kind of, if you go 90s, the comedy clubs in anywhere, people would just buy tickets and not know who the comic was. Thursday night, you would just buy tickets and you didn't know who you're getting, and it would be a crapshoot. Where now, people don't go into a place unless they know exactly who the headliner is, or at least went online and looked them up or stuff like that.
I agree with you with the bursts of fame. The club owners, though, have been doing that for a while with like bringing in a Stormy Daniels or or actors that are just trying.
I remember
to do comedy.
when I was starting, it was and I'm not saying anything bad about these people, but so they were like soap stars were the ones were the Instagram-y type people at the time.
Right.
And I remember opening for a couple of them, and it was just women just showing up just to see them. And it was just like an hour-long Q&A. There wasn't even anything, but there were a lot of soap dudes that were doing that.
Mark Ridley, when I first started comedy, I would bring people, I'm doing my open mic, because my open mics on Wednesdays was my show. Right. So when I first started out, and there's a big difference, like doing comedy in your bubble, as you say, because in your bubble, people know references. You can mention things and they'll know what you're talking about, even if you don't talk about them.
Right.
Mark Ridley pulled me aside one day. He's like, Jeff, I love that you're bringing people, but you need to stop bringing people. He goes, well, because you have to find out if you're funny in front of strangers.
Yeah.
If you're funny in front of strangers, then you're funny.
Yeah. And there were a couple of Detroit guys, there's that I just remember being young that I would see crush in almost any scenario. When I was younger, I would look at the crowd and go, "Oh, this crowd looks older." I'm not, because keep in mind I'm 20 something. They're not going to get my. Now I look at the crowd and go, "Oh no, they're younger. They're not going to get." But I would see that, or if they look like bikers, or if I'd always have an excuse. I would let what the audience looked like start to intimidate me. And that's something you learn later on. I remember I was working with some guy and he looked at the crowd. He's like, what do you think this audience wants tonight? They get what they get. They don't have a choice. They have zero say in what they want or get tonight. Tell them exactly what you want to tell them. They sit there. That's their job. But like guys in Detroit, and I always wanted to do some type of compilation album. There's a lot of Detroit guys that just were at a weird time, and I'm social media wise, or just where your act is wise. There are a lot of headliners that sat on 45 minutes their entire career because nobody, right? I got called out from your friend week 2 of doing comedy to do new material. These guys went 20 years of being able to do the same 45 minutes because they were never on TV, and they were bouncing out at all the B-room comedy clubs where, they didn't have fans. The club would just fill up and but I'd see dudes that would crush in like Leo Dufour. Do you ever see him? Do you know who he is?
I love Leo Dufour.
But he's one of those guys, if you ask anybody in comedy, like because he stayed in Canada, and Detroit was kind of, but dude, he has some bits. One, I'd see him crush no matter what. If it was a biker crowd or white collar, whoever he was in front of, Asian, black, white, Latino, any ethnic group, any working, whatever, social class, he would get on stage and literally destroy with material that you think of anyone's famous bits now, you could go Gaffigan has Hot Pockets, so-and-so's got, you could think of somebody. Leo had or has some, I think, of the funniest benchmark bits that to me, like, I'm like, this should be a thing that like is quoted by everybody. Right. So, and I don't know if I've never seen him at a Montreal Comedy Festival, and he's Canadian. I don't know. There's some guys that when I was starting, looking back, like, why didn't you? You should have left. You should have, or it was just there, so you're just sometimes in that pocket of age where you're just too old to do this thing, and you've been around too much for anybody to think you're new. So no one's going to pay it. But his snowplow bit and his pot stuff, he was doing pot material before legit any comic that you can think of that's famous because they're doing pop material. Leo was doing it 100 years before everybody was.
Leo's like, he's not intimidating to anyone. He looks like you'd hang out with Leo.
Yeah.
And so that's probably why he connects with almost
everybody.
anyone.
Yeah, there's zero threat there, which is weird because I'm from an era where comedy was about being out of shape and being broke, right? And now I think comedy is going through a very 80s metal phase, or actually hairband phase, where there's a lot of fluff and just a lot of comics are like in shape. And here's a picture of me on my jet and all this stuff. You're like, you're a comic. You're supposed to have, now the thing is just being angry at the world. So that's easy. But you know, again, that's when I started. It was all, everybody like, you know, I'd worked with this kid who had a bit about having a three-way, and he was going off and he's like, yeah, I just can't get that bit to work or whatever. I'm like, dude, because your bit is about the funny thing that happens in a three-way. Nobody in that crowd is like, yeah, right. I mean, tell us about it. We always have three. I hate it when that happens, when you're so good looking. Two girls want to, like, literally, you're a comic. You should be talking about never getting laid. Should be, that's where the joke is, not, don't you hate it when supermodels, like both of them want, I'm like, oh, dude, it's literally talking about going to CrossFit and kale shakes and having two. I'm like, yeah, things have changed. Like, I miss the big overweight comics that were just horrible to their bodies. That's how it was supposed to be. I don't know. It's kind of like country singers that sing about vacations in the Bahamas and jet skis. I just don't like it. I don't think it should be a thing. Like Kenny Chesney, man, that dude bugs me. Something about, I just hate barefoot in the sand type talk from country people, because I want to hear that you can't afford a vacation. I want to hear that you've been working for 20 years straight and your cousin won't even let you borrow the cabin. Like,
you love your truck, but you need a new one.
But you love your truck, but it doesn't work. So you're walking. That's why you're hitchhiking, because your life sucks. I don't want to hear about, you know, all the pina coladas you're going to drink when you get to the, you know, island. You're broke. So anyway.
So funny. Oh, wait, follow-up question from earlier. Once you became famous, did you ever talk to Lucy Liu?
No, and I've told you, I've said that story enough on radio and whatever that I've even seen people tweet at her. Never, not even hee or thumbs up, nothing. So it's probably better though.
All right, well, that's too bad.
Yeah, I'll say the story
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember if I had any interaction after. No, I don't think so. I think that was it. And I don't even think, you know, I think she signed me up for open mic and then I never saw her or talked to her again. So she might even quit like the next week or something. Like I had no interaction. I don't remember ever having like a conversation like, how do you think the set went, or her coming up to me.
So had you not met Lucy Liu that particular night and she convinced you to do open mic, what do you think you'd be doing now?
All I knew is when I was going to Eastern, I think I was really into psychology and communication. So I think I was gonna wanted to be a psychiatrist, or then it started switching because I knew I was creative and advertising probably was the way I was going to go, or because I enjoyed speech classes and stuff. I also was going to like, well, if I just never leave college, I could just teach speech at Eastern and then never have to figure anything out. So that's probably the ways that I would have went. But it goes in circles. Even now, after doing comedy with COVID and I'm, you know, sitting here in Michigan, I'm like, what am I going to do with my life? What's going to be the thing? Like, what can I do that I never have to leave my house?
Well, you could become a full-time author. I do want to talk about your books, but I do want to ask about Last Comic Standing first and the path to Last Comic Standing. Well, you've done 2 Comedy Central Presents. Was the first one just before or after winning the second season of Last Comic Standing?
One was before. I did a Tonight Show and a Presents before Last Comic. And then Last Comic, and then did another Presents and a Tonight Show and a bunch of just other stuff. I did an hour special that was on Netflix, but when Netflix, this is a timing thing, when Netflix was just becoming Netflix, you know, so you had it on there, but it wasn't what it was now. And then it got taken off Netflix because it's just an algorithm thing. And then whoever owns it put it on Amazon Prime.
Of all these events, which is the one where you're like, oh my God, everyone knows who I am now. I'm John Heffron.
I had a couple of those moments. I remember I was in Vegas right when Last Comic started airing. And I remember just going, you know, and it hadn't been on. And I remember getting stopped like just throughout the casino 3 times. Like from wherever I was going, walking, from like 3 of the most random people, like an older dude and then some young girl. They all mentioned like a bit that I just did, like some golf swing, some old bit. They all mentioned kind of the same bit. I was like, oh, this is am I a thing, or am I, you know? And then just after that, yeah, it especially after Last Comic. I remember being in the airport at 4 or 5 a.m., with headphones on, and I was just so tired, and just people just coming up the whole time. It was cool. But I had little moments of that glimpse, a little before Last Comic. When I used to do morning radio here in Detroit, I would be out all the time, and people would come up and at least knew my name or recognize my, nasally twang.
I listened to you with Danny Bonaducci and the Q crew.
Yeah. So that was probably like my first experience. Like from the Comedy Central stuff, no one really ever said anything. Years after Last Comic, then it turned into that I go to people would stare for a second, and then you could feel them staring, and then they'd always come up, and I would get, did you go to, so-and-so tavern all the time? I was a bartender there. You look familiar. Were you one of my regulars? Did you go to whatever high school? Like people just they wouldn't immediately, think I was on a show. They would just go, this guy's face is familiar. And they would just guess.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. Does your kid play soccer with my kid? It was just like always that. And I never want to go, well, but you probably, because then, you'd have people go, nah, that's not it.
It's a numbers game, right? So probably not as many people watched Comedy Central at the time. Maybe even, let's say it was even just 2 million people. But Last Comic Standing, your season had something like 15 million plus.
Yeah.
A week.
Yeah, we had the most out of all the seasons. It was just, that was like a perfect wave.
And this is before social media.
Not a lot of options. I mean, there was people watched network TV. Yeah. So we had 15 million people an episode, but no way to capture them. Looking back, like there was no way to then get that fan base, because you had MySpace at the time. My MySpace page crushed it. Then, as time went on, it got less and less. Because you watch a guy now on America's Got Talent or something. I have a lot of friends that do that show, and their numbers, you just watch their social media stuff and their numbers spike like crazy. Josh Blue, who won Last Comic, he's on AGT.
Well, sure. Well, now AGT gets probably even more. I mean, that's like a phenomenon, that show now. So
I don't know how you do comedy in like 90 seconds, though. Wouldn't even know. Yeah, I don't even know how you would do it. It'd be impossible.
So what was it like being on Last Comic Standing with all of those? You were with some huge names: Alonzo Bowden, Kathleen Madigan, Tammy Pescatelli, Todd Glass, Bonnie McFarlane. Like these are some huge names. Is it, even at your level, is it still intimidating?
You know what? At the time, like looking back, because that show was on so long ago, I was like, yeah, there's no way I should have lasted a week with that group. But everybody's grown since then. There's no way, if you look at it as a sporting event, there's no way I would have been out the first week, compared to, Goldman or Kathleen Madigan. Are you kidding me? With just those two, or Alonzo, or anybody, Tammy. And I could still, we'll hold a candle too. I'm not worried about him. But Bonnie McFarlane it's crazy funny. What helped me on that show was, I think Michigan did, in the sense where I had a couple t-shirts that said the word Detroit on it. And I remember talking in wardrobe, they weren't gonna block out any logos, because that's just really expensive. So you had to wear everything. Nothing could have a logo on it. Anything. There's no print. Or if they did, they put a little piece of black tape over anything that says. So I had a shirt that said Detroit Soul on it. And they're like, you can't wear that. I'm like, it's not a company. It's not a logo. It's just literally the words Detroit Soul. But there was a company in Detroit at the time. It was a clothing company that had Detroit Funk, Detroit Soul, whatever. So I decided, I wore the t-shirt, and we were kind of sequestered, so you didn't have a lot of different clothes. So I literally wore the same stuff all the time, and it just promoted the crap out of that person's t-shirt company that I think I bought at some boutique or someplace in Royal Oak. But it let everybody in the Detroit area know I'm from Michigan. I literally think that was a clutch play, that when voting started, obviously being from Detroit, Michigan, Detroit people are very kind of stick with their own, and I think I got a lot of votes just that way. And at the end of Last Comic, they didn't let me even get to talk when I won. It was a weird thing, normally I have a thing. And I remember looking at the camera, and this was the only thing that was on, and I held up my Michigan hand, and I pointed at it, and I just went, thank you, Michigan. Like, it was the only thing I got to say at the end of Last Comic when I won. because they go, we're going to cut to you. You have 2 seconds. They literally said that. And then as the balloons are dropping, they plug season 3 of Last Comic Standing. That happened 2 weeks later. But so I just turned my hand, showed the Michigan mitt, and went, yeah, thank you. That was it.
Yes, us Michigan born. We take care of our own. It was probably between that and Jeff Katz calling everybody going, hey, remember the guy from the spaghetti bender?
Plus, I got fired from Q95 in Detroit, but I just came off of 6 years of being morning radio in Detroit. So I had some decent numbers of people knowing who I was, even if they didn't know me as a comedian. It's just like every politician. It doesn't matter what they believe in or something. Is their name recognizable? People just vote if, for people that they recognize their name.
So how did you feel? You won $50,000, right? And then how did you feel when season 3, how did you feel when season 3, when Alonzo walks away with 250,000?
Yeah. So I won 50. Alonzo won $250,000 like 4 weeks later. But here's the funny thing about my winning 50. When you won it, you got this thing. It wasn't a TV show. They didn't give you a TV show that was going to be on NBC. It was this thing called a development deal. So that basically, and you got that as part of winning Last Comic. So you couldn't even say no to it. That was legit. Just like, here, you won a bunch of car wax if you're on Price is Right. You can't say, I don't want that. So it was what's the math? I won $50,000, and it was a $50,000 holding deal is what it was called. Because now you were just on TV for 8 weeks or 9 weeks at 15 million. There were a lot of other networks that were like, okay, let's maybe grab this guy. So what happens with that $50,000 holding deal is they give you 50 grand, and then for a year you can't do anything. So they basically just take you off the market for $50,000, which I know some people are going, $50,000 is a lot. It's literally like $5. It's not, because I'll do the math for you. So then everybody on Last Comic, you got paid union scale through SAG to be on the show. So every time you saw somebody every week, that person got paid $310, right? Whatever the union thing is. So you're making $310 a week to be on a network show in front of 15 million people. Everybody who made it to the top 5 all got paid the same. Everybody made $22,000 from start to finish, right? From very first audition. If you were on every single episode, if your face ended up on air, you got $22,000. So I won my 50. Okay. NBC then subtracted the 22 that I already made from the 50, right? It wasn't on top of. They subtracted the 20 from the 30, right? So now that bumped me down to 30. And then with taxes at 28%, and then agent manager or whatever, and there was some other weird health insurance or insurance thing. I deposited a check after winning Last Comic Standing for $4,300.
Ouch.
I know. So I deposited for $4,300, or maybe it was actually, no, it was 47 because it was under 5. So it was like $4,700 because I got the check after it went through the ringer. And one, that the fact that they prorated me, you bastards, right? You prorated me. Everybody, Pescatelli, Gary Goldman, Alonzo, everybody made that standard stuff. And then, so I won on Last Comic. Yeah, 4,700 was the cash amount I walked away. I did the Detroit Soul t-shirt guy didn't even send me free t-shirts. So I didn't even make, any coin from that. But it was good though. It all came back.
The Detroit Soul guy probably sold more than $4,700 worth of shirts after the.
I think he did. I think I went to the Chrysler Building or someplace. He had a little store, and maybe he was there, and they're like, "Oh yeah, you wore my shirt on the TV." And like, I remember just being non give a shitty. I was like, "What? I just wear your shirt like every day on NBC and nothing."
Oh, man.
It was all good though. It's all fun.
It's all good. It's
all good.
Well, it's still awesome that you won, and I imagine that you were able to get more zeros, as you said earlier, when you were doing the clubs.
Yeah, that changed, and then everything changed after that.
I know we're kind of nearing the end of our time. You have an amazing podcast.
Yeah, I do a podcast with another fellow Last Comic Standing winner, Jon Reep. We do a little Heffron and Reep podcast. I tried doing podcasts on my own, and I just don't have it in me. I just can't babble. It seems like I'm long-winded, but I need somebody talking to me in order to do it. Yeah.
That's a fun podcast. You've been doing that for a while.
We started like 10 years ago. I'm also bad at follow through. If me and him would have just kept doing it, we go through things. Like he was going and then he went through a divorce and he just stopped doing it for a year. And then I'm like, we should do it again. And then we'd start it. Then I went through it. And it was always these start and stop. So this one's been somewhat consistent. We just did it over COVID. It was one of those things where I was home going, well, I probably should have been working on this for a while and just cranked it back up. It's fun though. Me and Jon Reep, I brought him to Michigan and we did this town swap thing where I performed in his town and then he came to Michigan and he performed here. And then we decided to get a little cray-cray and we decided that we wanted to perform at bowling alleys in Michigan all up and down 131. So we put together, it's called the How We Roll Tour.
It always amazed me how many bowling alleys do comedy shows.
I didn't know it was a thing. We were literally going, let's do like these one-nighters, since this is back if clubs aren't opening and we can only have 50 people in a room or whatever. Let's just try to get creative here. And then we found out that there's a couple clubs that are in bowling alleys and we don't know what they're like. And we're like, let's get back. We feel like it's Rocky IV remember when he like trains really rich and then he goes back to the basics. We kind of figured like that's what this is like. We're going to do those. Have you been to any of those clubs?
I've been to a few. I can't think of the names, but Chaplin's, which I'm sure you've been to.
Yeah, Chaplin's, which is no longer there. But yeah, they that's where Jeff Foxworthy started his redneck thing. First time he did it. Yeah, Chaplin's was at 2 bowling alleys.
Yeah, because they all have these banquet halls. When they're not doing banquets, they're doing comedy shows.
Yeah.
One last thing is you've written a couple books, The Holding Deal, and you wrote a book called I Come to You from the Future.
Yeah, one was an advice one, but The Holding Deal I put out during COVID. Actually, I mentioned The Holding Deal earlier. That's kind of where I got the idea for it. It's about a comic who wins a reality TV show, but it's all fake. And it's a spy thriller. And the comic becomes a courier in every city he goes to. He's supposed to just perform and then drop off a package, and that's it. He's not supposed to ask any questions, and he gets a few extra bucks every week if he just drops off an envelope to somebody in whatever town he's in. And the craziness happens from there. It's The Holding Deal.
The Holding Deal. So many ways to enjoy Jon Heffron. Live at bowling alleys.
And mostly, here's a big way. My social media numbers suck. So if anybody's listening and you're on Instagram, I need to sweeten those numbers. I'm telling you right now. Do I even need music? How about, wait, what's this? No. I'm going to do this right here. Hey, everybody, it's comedian Jon Heffron. You just heard me on the podcast. But listen, if you're on Instagram, go to Instagram right now. And in the search, type comedian Jon Heffron. And you're going to see me and hit the follow button. Just, I don't do anything fun on Instagram. I'm going to be honest with you. I do nothing fun. I don't have yoga pants, so I never show my ass in yoga pants. However, I need to beef up the numbers because I've been yelled at, before. So, okay. So there you go.
No, that was an excellent commercial. I was just going to ask you where we can keep up with you on the socials. Everyone needs Instagram at least 10,000 so you can get the swipe up on the stories.
Yeah, 10, or Facebook / Jon Heffron if you're in Michigan. Doing a lot more shows here at home than on the road. Sticking close. See you in a bowling alley somewhere up north. I was trying to do that in the fall. Like that was my big thing is I was just like, why am I even going to leave Michigan? There's so many fun cities that I can just go.
All the fun's in Michigan. Yeah, I think your schedule's on jonheffron.com. Check it all out. It's cool.
Well, it was great to finally, I was looking at the thread when you gave me the link to how to talk to you. And I realized it's been a long process. I've just kept scrolling and it was always like, I'll do it in a week. I'll do it in with COVID. You promise stuff and then you never write anything down. You're like, wait, when are we doing this? So I'm good. I'm glad I could finally close that open loop in my gut. And we finally did it.
Yes. Thank you so much. I do appreciate it.
You should stop by. I'm at the Comedy Castle in November. You should.
I will definitely do that.
Don't bring your buddy, though, because then if he hears anything somewhat similar to anything I did at the Spaghetti Bender in 1990 at Eastern, then I'm going to have to hear from that Yahoo, and I just don't have it in me.
I'll make sure.
Okay.
Yeah, keep that Jeff away.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, everyone. How awesome was Jon Heffron? One of my favorite comedians ever since my days in college. Loved listening to him on Q95.5 with Danny Bonaducci. So exciting to finally get a chance to hang with him. Love that story about Lucy Liu. It's amazing, isn't it? How just one event in your life can change the rest of your life forever. You just have to be open to it. Definitely check out Jon's books. I'll put a link to them in the show notes. Also, if Jon Heffron comes to your town, whether it be a comedy club or bowling alley, definitely go see Jon in concert. He's hilarious, and you'll have an amazing time laughing all night. Speaking of having an amazing time, this episode was amazing. But we're nearing the end. The end of the episode is upon us. So that means only one thing, doesn't it? That's right. It means it's time for another trending hashtag from the world of hashtag Roundup. Follow hashtag Roundup on Twitter at hashtag Roundup. Download the absolutely always free hashtag Roundup app for your Google or Apple phones. Play along with us every day, all day, and one day one of your tweets may show up on an episode of Live from Detroit, The Jeff Dwoskin Show. Fame and fortune await you. This week's hashtag Unlikely 2021 College Course. Brought to you by The Unlikely Game, a weekly game on hashtag Roundup. Time to dive into some unlikely 2021 college courses. Inspired, of course, by the conversation I had with Jon about registering for classes at Old Eastern Michigan University. Sit back and enjoy these hashtag Unlikely 2021 College Courses. How to get a degree in epidemiology simply by reading Facebook. Excellent unlikely college course. Science and other bogus facts. How to cover your nose with your mask. I think a lot of people need that one. Snapchat filters for dummies. The history of pizza toppings. Ooh, finally we can learn where pineapple pizza came from. Assembling IKEA furniture. That's an important course to take if you want to save your marriage one day in the future. McFlurry machine repair. Hopefully one day someone from McDonald's will take that class. Breathing while wearing a mask 101. I need that, and 102. COVID home remedies. Yeah, that sounds like a great class. Why should the pets get all the good medicine? How to hook a catfish. How to win an argument on the internet. The Office quotes. These are all amazing hashtag Unlikely 2021 college courses. Quantum physics for babies. Never too early to learn. I am Groot for beginners. I am Groot. I am Groot. I am Groot. I'm sorry, I shouldn't assume you also took that course and understood what I just said. And the final hashtag Unlikely 2021 college course. Tequila 101. Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. Tequila. All right. Those were awesome. And they're all, of course, retweeted at Jeff Dwoskin Show on Twitter. They will also be listed in the show notes. Retweet them. Show them some love. One day I'll read your tweet, and you'll hope everyone retweets you as well. Show them some love. Here we are at the end of episode 77. Can you believe it? That just flew by, didn't it? I want to thank my guest, Jon Heffron, for joining me. I want to thank my friend Jeff Katz for allowing me to share his Jon Heffron story with Jon and the world. And of course, I want to thank all of you for coming back week after week. It means the world to me, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of The Jeff Dwoskin Show with your host, Jeff Dwoskin. Now go repeat everything you heard and sound like a genius. Catch us online at thejeffdwoskinshow.com or follow us on Twitter at Jeff Dwoskin Show, and we'll see you next time.